The prepper market has been selling gear to anxious people for decades, and a significant portion of it is overpriced, underpowered, or simply designed to make the buyer feel prepared rather than actually be prepared. Some of it is outright useless in real emergencies. These are the top 12 useless prepper items, and what actually works instead. Number 12. Decorative multi-tool credit card tools. The credit card-sized stainless steel multi-tool that fits in your wallet sounds like a brilliant idea in the product photography. In actual use, the tools are functionally useless in any real scenario. The knife blade is too short and too thin to cut anything more substantial than tape. The can opener requires a grip strength and leverage angle that the card format physically cannot deliver, and the ruler tells you how long something is, but doesn't contribute to solving any practical problem. These tools are sold primarily as novelty gifts and as impulse purchases at airport stores and outdoor equipment checkouts. They are designed by people who needed a product to photograph rather than a tool to use. The materials are thin enough that any task requiring real torque, tightening a screw, prying something open, cutting through rope, will bend or snap the card while the task remains undone. The specific failure mode that makes these particularly unhelpful in an emergency is the grip. The flat card format provides no meaningful handle, which means every tool on it is used at mechanical disadvantage. The thing a tool needs most in a crisis is reliability. Credit card tools deliver neither reliability nor capability. What actually works instead? A Victorinox, Swiss Army knife, Classic SD, or any of the compact Victorinox pocket models provides genuinely functional scissors, blade, nail file, and screwdriver in a package smaller than most wallets. Victorinox has manufactured these knives in Eibach, Switzerland since 1884, and the quality standards have not degraded in that time. A Classic SD retails for approximately $20 to $25. The tools on it are sized and made to actually work. No novelty item in a wallet approaches it for the space and price. Number 11. Mylar emergency blankets, cheap single-use version. This one requires nuance because the tool itself is legitimate. Emergency Mylar blankets, also called space blankets, are genuine hypothermia prevention tools. They reflect up to 90% of radiated body heat back toward the user, are compact enough to carry in a pocket, and weigh almost nothing. The National Search and Rescue community includes them in standard survival kit recommendations, and they have genuinely saved lives in cold weather emergencies. The technology, developed from NASA's research into heat management for satellites, works as described. The useless version is the cheap, crinkly, single-use foil blanket sold in 3 packs for $5 at convenience stores and outdoor equipment checkout counters. These are manufactured to a minimum specification that prioritizes price over performance. They are thin enough to tear with normal movement, impossible to refold to anything resembling original size, making them single-use even if they somehow don't tear, extremely noisy in wind, which is both distracting and reveals your position if concealment matters, and manufactured at tolerances that make their stated heat reflection effectiveness inconsistent across units. The more fundamental limitation is what they don't do. A space blanket reflects radiated heat but does not address wind chill, does not absorb or wick moisture from the body, and provides no insulation value against conductive heat loss from contact with cold ground. Wrapping a cheap space blanket around yourself in a 25 miles per hour wind while sitting on cold, wet ground will extend your life compared to nothing. But the margin is smaller than the marketing implies. What actually works instead? A reusable woven Mylar emergency blanket from Essol, survive outdoors longer, or Grabber is thicker, folds compactly after use, and can be deployed multiple times. Budget approximately $12 to $18. For general emergency preparedness and car kit applications, a wool blanket is the more practical choice. Heavier, but it insulates even when wet, provides windbreak, can be used as a sleeping wrap, and does not require careful handling to avoid tearing. Military surplus wool blankets are available for $15 to $40 and will outlast any foil product by decades. Number 10. Portable solar chargers, cheap version. The small solar panel charger, typically a single or double folding panel the size of a book that connects to a USB port, is one of the most purchased and most underperforming prepper tech items on the market. The marketing promises independence from the grid. Charge your phone from sunlight wherever you are. The reality for the $20 to $40 versions that flood online marketplaces is charging rates so slow in real-world conditions that a full smartphone charge might take 12 to 24 hours of sustained direct sunlight. Assuming genuine, unobstructed direct sunlight without cloud cover, ideal panel angle tracking through the day, and no leaves, partial shade, or panel degradation reducing output. The efficiency ratings on cheap solar chargers are measured under laboratory conditions using the solar constant of approximately 1,000 watts per square meter. Conditions that represent a clear midday sun at the equator with the panel perfectly oriented. In a temperate climate, on a partly cloudy day, with the panel sitting at whatever angle it happens to be at, actual output is a fraction of rated capacity. The gap between rated watts and delivered watts is the space where disappointed buyers write Amazon reviews. There is also a secondary problem that cheap solar panels share with cheap electronics generally: the USB output regulation. Inconsistent voltage and amperage delivery can trigger modern smartphones' charging circuit protection, causing the phone to not charge at all rather than charge slowly. What actually works instead, a quality 20,000 mAh power bank from a reputable manufacturer, Anker, Jackery, or similar brands, stores enough charge to fully recharge a typical smartphone 4 to 6 times. Charged at home before an emergency, it works immediately, reliably, and without any sunlight. Price range, $35 to $65. For situations where grid charging truly isn't available over multiple days, a 100-watt foldable solar panel from Goal Zero, Jackery, or EcoFlow paired with a quality battery provides meaningful generation. But the honest framing is that solar supplements stored battery power rather than replacing the need for it. Integrated Solar Plus battery systems from reputable brands provide accurate power specifications and realistic expectations of daily charging capacity. Number 9. Water purification straws as primary water source. Water filtration straws, most commonly associated with the LifeStraw brand, which has been on the market since 2005 and has genuine humanitarian applications in developing world water access, are legitimate products that genuinely filter bacteria and protozoa from water. The hollow fiber membrane technology works as advertised. The problem is not the product itself, but the specific application that prepper marketing promotes, using a personal filtration straw as your primary or sole water treatment solution in an extended emergency. The limitations are specific and important. The LifeStraw and similar hollow fiber straws filter bacteria and protozoa to effective levels, but do not filter viruses. A critical gap in areas where viral contamination is a concern, including many disaster scenarios involving flooding and sewage system failures. They do not filter chemical contaminants, heavy metals, or dissolved minerals. They have a finite lifespan, typically rated at 1,000 liters, after which they must be replaced. The operational limitations matter as much as the filtration limitations. A filtration straw requires drinking directly from a water source or from a container held at straw height. You cannot pre-treat water in a pot for cooking. You cannot fill a water container for hygiene use. You cannot share filtered water between multiple people simultaneously. In an actual emergency with a family of 4 needing water for drinking, cooking, and basic sanitation, a single filtration straw is immediately insufficient. What actually works instead, for short-term emergencies, 72 hours, sealed commercial water or properly stored tap water in food-grade containers is the most practical solution. No filtration required for water you already know is safe. For extended emergencies, a combination approach. Stored water for immediate use, chemical treatment, household unscented bleach at 8 drops per gallon of clear water for secondary treatment, and a gravity-fed filter for volume. The Sawyer Squeeze can be configured as a gravity filter and costs approximately $30 to $40. Filtration straws are a useful addition to a complete system, not a substitute for having one. Number 8. Tactical flashlights. 500 lumen keychain version. The prepper market has produced an extraordinary number of tactical flashlights, typically black anodized aluminum cylinders sold at $15 to $25. Marketed with specifications that sound impressive. 500 lumens, 5 modes, IPX, 8 waterproof rating. aircraft-grade 6061 aluminum body, built-in strike bezel for self-defense. The word tactical is doing significant work in that sentence, and like most marketing language, it is doing the work that the product itself cannot. Most of these products perform adequately for approximately 6 to 18 months before the battery contacts develop corrosion that causes intermittent failures. The mode cycling switch loses its positive tactile response and starts skipping modes unpredictably, or the runtime at high power proves to be 35 minutes rather than the 3 hours listed in the specifications, which typically reflect the lower lumen eco mode, not the high mode anyone would use in an emergency. The waterproof ratings on cheap versions often reflect a dip test rather than sustained submersion, and they fail predictably with repeat exposure. The specifications problem is consistent. Lumen output measurements on cheap flashlights are typically taken at turn-on before thermal throttling reduces output, not sustained output over a realistic use period. A $20 flashlight that produces 500 lumens may produce that for 30 seconds before the LED heats, and the driver circuit reduces output to protect the LED, which is a real engineering limitation, but one that should be disclosed rather than buried in the fine print. What actually works instead? Streamlight and Phoenix produce flashlights in the $35 to $75 range with verified specifications, manufacturer warranties with meaningful terms, and track records in professional use by law enforcement and fire services. The Streamlight ProTac 1L-1AA accepts both a CR123A lithium battery and a standard AA alkaline, which matters significantly in an extended emergency when common battery types are available but specialty batteries are not. For bedside emergency lighting, the Streamlight Siege lantern runs on 3 AA batteries and provides 360-degree area light rather than a focused beam. Reliability from a name brand manufacturer is worth the extra $20 to $40 over the cheapest available alternative. Number 7. 30-day freeze-dried meal buckets, without testing them first. The big bucket of freeze-dried meals from any of the major emergency food suppliers, Mountain House, ReadyWise, Legacy Food Storage, and others, is a legitimate product category. Freeze-dried food stored properly in sealed containers has documented shelf lives of 25 to 30 years. The caloric content is real. The products are genuinely edible, sometimes genuinely good. The problem is not the food itself. The problem is buying a 30-day supply of meals you have never cooked, never tasted, and never assessed against your household's actual needs, and then counting them as preparedness. It is the prepping equivalent of buying a gym membership and calling yourself fit. Emergency food that you have never prepared has several categories of unknown consequences. Some freeze-dried meals require significantly more water for rehydration than the package makes immediately obvious. Water is also a resource you may be managing carefully. Some people find the texture and flavor of freeze-dried food unacceptable under stress, particularly children and anyone with texture sensitivities around food. Many products have sodium content that creates real problems for people managing hypertension or kidney conditions. Cooking fuel availability to boil the water required for rehydration is an assumption that may not hold in the specific emergency scenario. There is also the rotation problem. A freeze-dried bucket that sat in a closet for 12 years may still be technically edible, but the person opening it during a crisis has no prior relationship with the product, no preference knowledge, and no practical experience preparing it. What actually works instead? The rotate what you eat approach, building a 2 to 4 week supply of foods your household actually consumes. On a rotation cycle where newer purchases go behind older ones. Canned vegetables, canned meats, dry rice, dry beans, peanut butter, olive oil, and pasta. These are foods you know how to cook, that your family will eat under stress, that require no special equipment, and that can be exchanged into your regular grocery rotation rather than sitting as a separate and expensive emergency category. Purchase one freeze-dried meal, cook it, evaluate it, then decide whether to invest in a 30-day supply. Number 6. Bug-out bag hatchets without practice. The compact hatchet or tactical tomahawk carried in a bug-out bag as an essential survival tool is one of the more aspirational items in the prepper toolkit. It photographs extremely well. It looks capable and purposeful. It costs $40 to $150 in most configurations. In practice, cutting and splitting firewood efficiently with a hatchet is a skilled manual activity that requires hundreds of hours of practice to develop into genuine competence, and a person who has never actually practiced is going to produce blisters, poorly split wood, and exhausted frustration in exactly the conditions where conserving energy and maintaining morale matters most. The Gransforsbrook and Council Tool companies make hatchets that are genuinely excellent tools, well-balanced, properly hardened, handles correctly fitted. The hatchet, as a concept and a tool category, is legitimate. What is not legitimate is including one in a bag and assuming that ownership equals capability. The same competence gap applies to most primitive skills gear. Ferro rods, useful only if you've practiced fire starting with them. Full tang survival knives, useful only with practiced fieldcraft. Snares, useful only with actual trapping knowledge and legal permissions. The tool's value is entirely determined by the user's trained competence with it, and competence specifically requires prior practice in conditions that aren't comfortable. What actually works instead, a quality folding saw, specifically a Baco Laplander or Silky Gomboy, weighs 7 to 9 ounces compared to 1.5 to 2 pounds for a hatchet, takes dramatically less skill to use effectively, is significantly safer in untrained hands, and handles most fieldwood processing tasks a hatchet would be used for. If carrying a hatchet is the actual goal, then practice with it before adding it to a bag that gets carried into any real situation. Gear you can use competently under pressure is worth 10 times the gear you're planning to figure out when you need it. Number 5. Night vision monoculars under $200. Low-cost night vision monoculars, the $80 to $150 devices sold online with Gen 1 night vision specifications, are perhaps the single category of prepper gear with the largest gap between consumer expectation and actual capability. Military-grade night vision uses image intensifier tubes, vacuum tube devices that amplify ambient light photons through a multi-step process to produce the familiar green-lit image. This technology is expensive because the tubes are complex, precision manufactured, and have performance specifications that are verified and certified. The cheap consumer devices marketed as night vision for under $200 use digital image sensors with built-in infrared illuminators, essentially IR-LED flashlights that illuminate a scene at frequencies invisible to the naked eye, paired with a digital camera sensitive to that IR light. This is functionally closer to a regular camera with an IR flashlight than to any military night vision technology. The image quality is low resolution. There is noticeable lag between real-world motion and the displayed image. The range is typically 50 to 75 feet in practical conditions, not the 300 feet sometimes listed on specs measured in ideal conditions. And the IR illuminator emits light that other people with IR-sensitive cameras or actual night vision can detect clearly, meaning it can make you visible to a threat while not providing the detection range you thought you had. What actually works instead? Quality headlamps in red light mode for navigation and tasks where light is needed, and training in operating in low light conditions, which includes understanding when not to use any light at all. For genuine night vision capability that performs to expectation, the entry point starts around $1,500 for used Generation 3 American manufactured devices. The gap between $150 and $1,500 is not a price difference. It is a capability category difference. A headlamp is more honest about what it is. Number 4. Hand crank emergency radio, cheap version. Hand crank emergency radios are a legitimate preparedness item. The ability to receive no AA weather alerts and emergency broadcasts without relying on grid power or charged batteries is genuinely valuable in a prolonged power outage. This is not an argument against emergency radios. It is an argument against the specific cheap versions that dominate the low end of the market. The $20 to $30 hand crank radios sold at checkout lanes and discount stores frequently share several documented failure modes. The crank mechanism, made from light plastic gears, fails within the first 12 to 24 months of infrequent use, or critically, when someone cranks with any urgency during an actual emergency. The charging circuit attached to the crank delivers power output measured in milliwatts, not the hundreds of milliwatts required to register on a modern smartphone's charging circuit, which means the charges your phone feature is essentially non-functional in most tested examples. The radio reception, the actual core function, varies enormously in budget models. Many have inadequate antenna design for no-AA weather band reception in marginal signal conditions, which is precisely when you need it most. FEMA's preparedness guidance specifies having a battery or hand crank-powered no-AA weather radio, but does not specify that the cheapest available unit meets the actual communication need. What actually works instead, the Midland ER310, is consistently recommended by emergency preparedness organizations and has been sold with positive field reviews for years. The Kaido KA500 is another reliable option with solar charging, hand crank, and 3 battery backup options. Budget $40 to $65 for a unit that reliably receives no-AA all hazards broadcasts, has a crank mechanism built to last, and has been tested by people who use it. The American Red Cross has assessed and endorsed specific emergency radio models. Checking their recommendations before purchasing is more useful than checking the Amazon star rating on the cheapest listing. Number 3. WaterBob/bathtub water bladder. The WaterBob and similar bathtub bladder products, a large polyethylene bladder that fills a standard bathtub to store approximately 100 gallons of water, address a real need in emergency preparedness: water storage before a known disruption. The concept is entirely sound. Bathtubs represent a substantial storage volume that can be filled quickly from household water pressure, and 100 gallons of potable water represents approximately 2 weeks of drinking water for a family of 4 at the standard 1 gallon per person per day minimum estimate. The execution has limitations that the product marketing significantly undersells, and those limitations determine whether the product is useful for your specific situation or not. The WaterBob requires advance warning of the emergency and functioning municipal water pressure to fill. It is designed for exactly one type of emergency. You learn that a disruption is coming: a hurricane warning, a forecasted winter storm that may affect utilities, a pre-announced infrastructure maintenance, and you fill the bladder before the water stops. If the emergency is sudden, a major earthquake, a rapid onset contamination event, an unexpected grid failure, the WaterBob is useless because there is no warning period and the water may not be running when you think to use it. The bladder also occupies your bathtub completely during the emergency period, making the bathroom inaccessible for its primary sanitation use, which creates a separate sanitation challenge that the water storage was supposed to help solve. And the product is described as single-use by the manufacturer. Once drained, the bladder degrades in a way that makes refilling for subsequent use unreliable. What actually works instead? Pre-stored water in stable, specifically designed containers. FEMA recommends a minimum 2-week supply of water, 1 gallon per person per day, stored in food-grade containers that are replaced on a 12-month rotation. A 7-gallon aquatainer, 5-gallon food-grade water storage jugs, or cases of commercially sealed bottled water that are rotated through use cover a broader range of sudden onset emergency scenarios without requiring advance warning to execute. The WaterBob is a reasonable supplemental product for slow onset emergency preparation, not a standalone water strategy. Number 2. 550 paracord bracelets as survival tools. Paracord, specifically 550 paracord, also designated Type 3 parachute cord, named for its nominal 550-pound minimum tensile strength, is a genuinely useful and genuinely versatile cordage with documented military and survival applications going back to World War II parachute rigging. It's lightweight, rot-resistant, and the 7 inner strands can be removed for finer applications like fishing line, suturing, and snares. This is not a critique of paracord. This is a critique of the bracelet format specifically. A 7-strand 550 paracord bracelet holds approximately 8 to 12 feet of cord when unraveled, depending on the bracelet's size. Unraveling the bracelet under any kind of stress, cold hands, low light, urgency, stress-induced fine motor skill degradation, takes 2 to 5 minutes and produces a tangled mass of cord that needs to be straightened before it is actually usable in the length you need. In a task where cordage is urgently required, spending 3 minutes fighting a bracelet before you can begin your actual task is not a feature. The inner strands require additional steps. The outer sheath must be cut and stripped back to access the 7 individual inner cords, each of approximately 45-pound test. That's a second operation on top of the unraveling. In a real scenario where you need 6 feet of cordage to secure something, tie a splint, hang a tarp, or lash gear together, the bracelet adds operational delay that a spool of paracord simply doesn't have. The bracelet also markets 8 to 12 feet of cord as an emergency supply, when most practical cordage tasks require significantly more. Hanging a bear bag requires 50 feet minimum. Building a basic shelter requires 30 to 60 feet depending on the design. Securing gear to a pack frame takes 15 to 20 feet with proper lashing knots. What actually works instead, 50 to 100 feet of 550 paracord on a spool or in a stuff sack. It costs less per foot than the bracelet, is immediately usable without any unraveling, and provides the actual length needed for practical tasks. As Creek Stewart has noted, the best survival gear is the gear you know how to use without thinking about it. A bracelet you've never unraveled in practice is just jewelry. The spool is not jewelry, it is cord, available immediately in the length you need. Number 1, expensive bug-out bag without a plan. This is the most expensive and most common mistake in preparedness. A fully loaded, premium brand bug-out bag, often $200 to $500 in gear, assembled from YouTube recommendations and stored in the closet with no accompanying plan, no practiced routes, no destination, no communication protocol for family members, and no familiarity with the contents. A bug-out bag is not preparedness. It is potential preparedness that only becomes actual preparedness when it is paired with knowledge of how to use every item in it, a clear understanding of when to leave and where to go, communication protocols with the people you would be evacuating with, and practice that reveals which items are actually needed and which are wishful thinking. The expensive bag purchased on credit and stored untouched for 3 years is less useful than a modest bag whose contents have been reviewed seasonally, whose owner has slept one night in the field with it, and whose carrier knows that the water filter works, the headlamp batteries are current, and the medications inside are not expired. Emergency management consultant Amanda Ripley, who has studied how people respond in real disasters, summarized the core principle in her work on disaster psychology. In a real emergency, you will not rise to the occasion. You will default to your level of training. The bag is not the preparation. The practice is. The correct version of preparedness, regardless of what bag it lives in, is a plan that has been thought through, written down, and communicated to the people who would need to execute it. It includes specific answers to specific questions. What triggers the decision to leave? Where are you going? What route? What if that route is blocked? How do family members communicate and reunite if they're separated when the trigger occurs? What do the children know? What are the medical needs? And which medications are in the bag and are they current? A $300 bag filled with premium gear and no answers to those questions is less useful than a $75 bag whose carrier has answered all of them and practiced the first 2 hours of a realistic scenario at least once. The tested, used, familiar bag, at any price point, is the genuinely useful one. The expensive, untested one is a security blanket that costs more. Start with the plan, then the practice, then the bag. 12 items, some genuinely useless, some useful only under specific conditions, some simply outcompeted by better alternatives. The common thread? The appearance of preparedness and actual preparedness are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where the prepper market makes most of its money. Hit that like button and subscribe, more content like this coming.